Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. We take our monuments for granted. Whether a chiseled block of granite sitting on a corner, a life-sized representation of someone in history, a memorial to those who have fallen in battle, we take our monuments for granted. We pass them every day. We don't give them a second look in most cases, and yet they are part of the art, part of the environment that we operate and live in. We should be cherishing them. My guest today does cherish monuments. He does not take them for granted. He leads a brigade of volunteers, especially young children, school-age children, who clean, repair, preserve monuments all over this region and, in fact, all over the country. Eugene Hough is co-founder of Saving Hallowed Ground. He is fanatical about this subject, and when I heard about it, because it is so different from most of the people I spend time with, although he is in many ways entrepreneurial, I invited him on to tell us his story. Welcome to 30 Minutes, Eugene.
Thank you, sir.
Happy to have you here.
Appreciate it.
First of all, what is the definition of a monument? Because as we were talking, it's everything from a grave marker, or can be anything, to a statue of Washington, Ben Franklin, any of the others. So what is a monument? A
monument conveys a message. It's an embodiment of an individual's name. It could be a recognition of a historical event, or a monument itself could be a plaque recognizing the significance of an architectural building or feature. But a monument embodies a message which is part of the challenge with Saving Hallowed Ground, to share that message and people can understand it.
When I think of a monument, and at least until this discussion, I think of a statue. When I think of a monument, I think of the trips we've taken to Italy, particularly, and other parts of Western Europe, where there are monuments on every corner. Beautiful, gorgeous, absolutely stunning works of art. Talk about taking them for granted. Those people pass them day in and day out and give them no attention at all. We as visitors look and gawk and say, my God, a human being was able to create that and embody the spirit, the message, etc. Why do people take monuments for granted?
We're moving too fast. I believe that the message of that monument, when they were dedicated, if you take from pre-colonial times up to the early 19th century, there was a lot more engagement in terms of recognizing these monuments because of anniversaries. You have your Veterans Day, Memorial Day. Families used to, in Victorian times, have picnics in cemeteries because it was something that culturally they understood the benefit of the wonderful settings with the plantings, but also the message behind these monuments. Today people say they love family, but in many cases they're out of touch even where their family members are interned.
Yeah, you just brought to mind the cemetery. Is it Laurel Hill?
Laurel Hill, yes.
Laurel Hill, which is open to the public, and they invite people in because it is a beautiful place.
Absolutely.
A serene place. And the monuments have something to do with that, I guess, those works of art that dot the landscape. Why, how, and when did you become interested in cleaning, repairing, and preserving monuments?
It embodied basically because
you're the only person I know, by the way, who does any of this.
My background is working with special populations and health and special education. I have a master's in policy and planning. So I've always been interested in structures. I've grown up in a family of architects, but my grandfather had said early on, you have to understand why a building or a structure is there. There is a message there. And he always felt that society was breaking away from respecting these particular sites. When I was in Sweden looking at long-term health care, I was looking at the rural elderly, and what was interesting besides the healthcare issue was I was finding rural remote cemeteries being abandoned because the population was moving into more urban settings. So who was going to take care of them? But also was fascinated by the story. Came back, got involved in healthcare, but I found that it was rather constricting. I really wanted to help the people, but also their history. And so I started under a company named Heritage Guildworks, which dealt with landscape preservation, but also cemetery preservation. And
how long ago was that?
That started probably 20 years ago. And then I know you're going to ask me where the Saving Hallowed Ground piece came in, and that was only more recently because of the need to try to reach out to a broader constituency to bring in other people to help us with our mission.
And you told me the story, but what was the conversation you had that was the genesis of the name, Saving Hallowed Ground?
For 5 years, I had been doing conservation work down in South Carolina and Augusta, Georgia region, Georgia in particular, and I was just fascinated historically because of the Southern culture and their history, pre-colonial, colonial. I never got that in my history books up here in Pennsylvania. Right. The cemeteries told the story, but it also showed there was a connection in Augusta, Georgia. It was at the end of what was called the Great Philadelphia Wagon Trail. And in fact, you had Pennsylvanians buried in this Augusta Colonial Cemetery. Mm-hmm. In going into these communities, I equated it always to the Charles Kuralt experience. You go in and people have these wonderful stories. And so besides getting those stories, it was very important to weave that into the preservation effort on the monuments. And I had that opportunity. Mm-hmm. In coming back to Pennsylvania, I was asked to give a presentation before our American Legion post here in Wayne, Pennsylvania, 668, Bateman Gallagher post. And afterwards, 2 area commanders and my current commander at that time, Marty Costello, we met, and Jerry Sweely, commander previously with post 805. And Jerry Sweely said, hey, what you're talking about here is saving hallowed ground. And the emphasis of that meeting was the response, Gene, you can't save every cemetery. So we spent 3 hours hashing it out, and we agreed, let's see if we can get a domain name and start this as a nonprofit.
You know, you mentioned down south and some of the old cemeteries. What came to mind are some of the old cemeteries in upstate Pennsylvania, some of those old coal towns that are barely being resuscitated now. They're losing the population, they've lost the economy. But some of those are, it's fascinating just to walk through those cemeteries, the markers, the grave sites, and again, some of the beautiful carving that was done 50, 100 years ago.
It's a treasure.
They really are treasures. Okay, Saving Hallowed Ground. You have a video clip that introduces Saving Hallowed Ground, what it is. And so let's take a look at that. It's about 2.5 minutes. And we'll come back and talk about how you've been able to use that as a springboard for a number of activities in this region, as well as other parts of the country. Saving Hallowed Ground.
These are hallowed grounds. This is hallowed ground. This is hallowed ground. This is hallowed ground. This is hallowed ground. My name is Eugene Hough, member of Bateman Gallagher, post 668 in Wayne, Pennsylvania.
My name is Marty Costello, commander of American Legion, post 668 here in Wayne, Pennsylvania.
Saving Hallowed Ground is a worldwide organization dedicated to the preservation and protection of monuments and markers commemorating veterans and patriots wherever they may be found.
There are hundreds of names of other soldiers and patriots still on this wall that have to be researched and honored, lest we forget. The educational component of this exercise comes from selecting a name out of this helmet, where the children of the Radnor schools come, take a name, research that name, and bring this soldier back to life.
Lieutenant William Bateman.
Anthony Leslie Cohen.
Mary Holmes Halson.
Similar monuments, as in Wayne, hundreds in fact, are located across the country that are in need of conservation and protection. Through the Saving Hallowed Ground program, we hope to work with you and other communities, not only in the United States, but overseas, to address this very important work. Please contact us at Saving Hallowed Ground, www.savinghallowedground.org. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
a local video shot at a monument not too very far from where we're sitting.
That's correct.
Right in Wayne. It's a beautiful monument, and that was erected in when?
1922.
22.
The sculptor, Mr. McKenzie, was a sculptor from Canada, and he was commissioned through individuals in the community
Yes.
to come up with a design.
What's the title?
It's the McKenzie Monument, but it's the World War II monument dedicated to the Doughboys. And thus you have, I believe, 7 individuals. The amazing thing is that anybody who goes up and does the participation, either observing the monument or cleaning and waxing, you can see the incredible detail. Each face is different.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Very powerful.
How many people are there like you around the country who have devoted their lives, part of their fortunes, to repairing, cleaning, and preserving monuments?
I guess we're the silent majority that we're out there, but I know that there are conservators and preservationists. What I found was that, and even with the government, they will do a major project, but how do you engage the locals to be a part of that process and the youth? And I don't see that being done.
Okay, so and that's an important dimension of what you do.
Yes,
and,
sir.
and I assume what differentiates what you do from what others are doing, just preserving monuments. Talk about the student program and the student involvement.
What I came up with 3 powerful words that embody what this mission is about, which is the preservation of monuments and markers dedicated to veterans and patriots wherever they may be found. Education, preservation, stewardship. Education meaning the students in teams, mentoring each other, working with their strengths and weaknesses to take a name, research that name, and compile a report. The preservation end is having the students then perform a hands-on conservation clinic, 1 or more if possible, on the monument. Something very powerful happens when you do that hands-on piece. They don't forget. And then the stewardship component is by the students doing a presentation in their school, gymnasium, or local church, sharing the story about their project, inviting the locals to come in and hear that story. We're finding people are moving here and there, and so a new individual moving to Radnor, if they're brought in and they've learned a little bit of history, maybe they're going to be the ones that are going to support that next project. We have coins that basically say Saving Hollow Ground on the front, on the back, education, preservation, stewardship. And what we're trying to do is figure out how can we embody and document and keep the projects that the students have in a digitized form. So we think of a hologram that might be put on the back of the coin that could upload the student's project. But most importantly, you're mentioning the coal region. I would like students in Wayne to be able to communicate with students up in Hazleton and vice versa. The students will take the lead.
Yeah, as you know, you go into some of those small towns, and in the town center, there is invariably a statue of somebody, something.
Absolutely.
It is the epicenter of the community. I'm thinking of Wilkesboro, I'm thinking of Scranton, and so on. There's some beautiful, beautiful monuments that have been there for generations.
And incredible stories that once you engage the community, particularly youth, they love the technology, but they slow down. And what I like is they stop texting and they start communicating with the adults.
Yes.
Good eye contact.
Yeah. Philadelphia's got to be rich in monuments, the city as well as the environs. But is there a particular community that you're aware of, probably in the Eastern Court, that seems to have more monuments than any other? Noteworthy, notable monuments.
I would,
other than D.C., the obvious.
yeah, I think I was sharing earlier the benefit of what Philadelphia region has in terms of an incredible diversified housing stock. Architecturally, you can see a vast variety of settings. You have your agrarian settings from the Lancaster setting to down to the wards of Philadelphia, and we have river communities like Chester. And so with that, you have individuals from various periods of times who represented society, and so the embodiment of those markers tie in with that and the people of the times. Marcus Hook, working blue class community, wonderful World War I marker. A lot of the people, hundreds of names on there. People needed money, it was a response, but there were, at the same time, these people were patriotic in terms of the American Revolution out at Valley Forge, And many of the monuments there are representative of from different states who put those monuments there. So we go beyond just the Delaware region in terms of what our story is.
You were telling me some of the markers along Lancaster Pike, for example, I guess milestone markers.
There are the Franklin markers, mile markers.
So they are hundreds of years old, just
Yes.
sitting there,
Yes.
unattended, nobody's paying particular attention to them. Who takes care of them?
In the case of Lower Marion Township, they went out and actually documented where those monuments were and actually made attempts to protect them. White Marsh, where I grew up, unfortunately, one of the markers is near a gasoline station. It was hit by a plow truck and it's still tilting to its side. Down near Chestnut Hill College, near the golf course, embedded into a stone wall there is one of the markers, and most people don't know it's there. It's covered with a lot of paint. The beauty was of those markers, and Franklin was the one that was installed because of the stagecoaches or mail delivery. We needed to know differences of time. They're large, very hard marble, but the marker over in Abington, Pennsylvania, when they widened the road, also was damaged. And after they're hit, because the marble splitting and spalling takes place. So that's where there are markers out there that do need protection, but you have to bring people to the awareness where they are.
Aren't there government agencies at the national, state, and local level with responsibility for attending to public monuments?
To a certain extent, yes. And the federal government has preservation organizations within the government that are out there who are supposed to address these monuments, like the Capitol Mall area. They take care of monuments, but ironically what I have found is that even with this overlining body of people, organizations, many of the monuments are falling through the cracks. The money isn't there, and then again, if you want to take on and address the monuments, there's a lot of red tape you have to go through to take it on. I will share with you that across right near the Amtrak station in Washington, D.C., is a monument that was donated in 1912 by the Knights of Columbus. And I was at a conference for World War I, and going back to the station, I looked at this incredible monument, and there were weeds growing out of it, and there was trash, and there was lichen, and you had this wonderful world globe being held in the talons of these eagles. And I said, here you are at the headquarters of our country near an Amtrak station, and here's this wonderful monument, and people are walking by, and it looks terrible. And so I've approached the Park Service, and our goal is to hopefully take students down from this region on Amtrak and have Washington, D.C. students, and maybe do some basic conservation on that monument. And Barbara Nixon, I believe, who I contacted, is receptive, at least at this stage, because the centennial for the Park Service is coming up next year.
Do you operate nationally?
Only through communication in terms of trying to stimulate projects. My work as the Monument Education Field Specialist has been basically along the Eastern Corridor, but we are looking as a nonprofit to try to get funding to go to these communities to conduct these projects, pass the torch so these communities can do these projects, but most importantly, then we want these communities to make sure they document and share those stories along the lines with other communities as well.
Europe, particularly Western Europe, Eastern Europe as well, I guess, certainly have more monuments, more antiquities than we do here in this country. Do they do a better job of revering and taking care of their public monuments?
Well, in terms of World War II monuments, and particularly World War I monuments, they do a spectacular job. It was a huge impact on their generations of people. And but what I am finding is that I just recently was in Hungary. If you jump back to earlier times, wonderful bronze sculptures and stone and marble featurings are not being taken care of. Vandalism, graffiti, or just conservation for these monuments. It is not a priority sometimes because of monies. There are private groups or organizations like the World Monument Foundation out there that are doing wonderful things. But again, I'm finding, how do we tie in a student component so they are part of the process? Because they're going to be the stewards for the future. They need to be exposed.
As a conservationist, as someone who preserves monuments, cleans and repairs. There are special tools, special solutions do you use, or do you have to use harsh chemicals to get some of the grime and whatnot off of these? No?
No harsh chemicals, and I equate number one with metals, like the Wayne Memorial. It was a combination of waxes that were used, that were put on there and act in a combination to emulsify and lift the soot. The bronze has copper in it, and so over time that oxidation, the greening effect is what you see. That is a corrosion taking place, and if you go up very closely with a magnifying glass, you can see the pitting. So what's happened is we're putting a waxing on different approaches. Walnut shell blasting in the past has been done. High pressure water is another way to lift that oxidation. We did a project at the, Princeton University on statues there at the Woodrow Wilson Institute, and that was using high pressure hot water. But then you have to put a wax coating on it. In terms of the stones, a combination of alcohols I use, and even prior to that, just deionized water with soft bristle brushes. Some monuments in Europe and Germany, sometimes they'll do just a subtle misting on the surface of the stone to lift the soot and, with fine brushes. And you may say, wow, that's a lot of work. I think most people are instantaneous, but then again, you're dealing with antiquities here, and you have to be sensitive to them. But it's not just the conservation, it's the story behind them, and we need to pair those together.
The story behind, but in many instances, the story has been lost, right? Because these monuments have been forgotten.
Right.
So how do you reconstruct the story?
Well, we found that
There's still a lot of sleuthing as well.
Well, the technology is interesting there. What we try to do is that when the students take on selecting a name, then we try to work and team them up with genealogists or local libraries that can help them start uncovering the information. And if you just Google a name, that's fine. We want them to do more than that. We also want to find books, which George, I know, loves, and this studio loves. They're instrumental. And Saving Hallowed Ground, we have close to 500 old books, many of them out of print, and the idea is to try to distribute those to the teachers that can use those to stimulate the student studies.
What's your relationship now with the Uncommon Individual Foundation? Because many of the books and the other materials you've collected are now housed there, is that right?
That's right.
In Devon. We
were asked to come in and give a presentation this past spring about what we're doing because it involves mentorship. Not only is an individual mentoring the students, but we're also having them mentor each other. So the spirit of that program and their on-track program towards post-secondary opportunities in terms of looking for schools or financial aid is ideal. And so what has formed from them now accepting us in their building there and having our archive space is an opportunity to try to promote what they have in terms of wanting to support post-secondary education programs for students. Because what happens is, what better alliance when students are taking on a public service project and researching. The next step is we recognize the importance of monuments and local history, but we also recognize the importance of your educational future. And this is where the Uncommon Individual Foundation can step in and partner. It's a win-win situation.
In addition to children, you had mentioned that you're also trying to establish relationships with veterans groups.
Yes.
To involve veterans as well.
Yes.
And how's that going?
Very successful from the standpoint in terms of what we are developing as a program. We did a project out at the Paoli Memorial Site. I've always wanted to have a component of special needs students and veterans who could come out and do conservation work on the monuments in a low profile pressure setting, an outdoor classroom lab setting. I know it works, and so we had the opportunity to have a film done entitled Restoration. And if you, right now, if you go to the Saving Hallowed Ground Facebook page, and you'll see, if you scroll down 5 of the entries, you'll see our restoration film. And the beauty of it is that we're trying to figure out how we can take the success of this film and these veterans who appreciate partaking in this and bring it to the VA and said this will work. And the only way that's going to work right now is developing a way to prove that it works, and that means developing some sort of a monitoring accounting system. And if that happens, then you have thousands of people coming back from current conflicts, and they're not all going to be able to receive the care at the VA facility, but a lot of them are outpatients, and they go back to their communities. So our communities have the monuments and cemeteries. We can take our outdoor classroom, bring them in, and it does work.
Good idea. It's a great idea. Do you, as part of the work you do, also take inventory of monuments in communities? Radnor, for example, Radnor Township, or Delaware County?
We're in the process of doing that, and part of the goal being is that anytime we do a project, we document where it is located. But ideally, what we would like to have is with each student project, almost we put with that QR code, would have a location where that monument is, and then almost like a Google Earth, these monuments would pop up. That's fine, and there are people that will have where these monuments are, but we want the stories to be told and what the students have done there.
I think there's an opportunity for intergenerational projects as well. I'm thinking again about the number of senior living facilities in the region, and God knows we have many of them, and teaming them up with students in the field because they too can help to tell the stories.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. We're doing a project right now at Gladwin Oddfellows Cemetery. And Saving Hollow Ground is going to meet one of the stewards, and we are going to give a presentation before the Gladwin Civic Association next week.
Right.
A representative from
Waverly Heights
facility is coming in because I approached them about what we would like to try to start, which we could do in any community, and it's going to be called the Gladwin Chronicles. And we will have a opportunity with students and hopefully the residents to not only tell the stories, if they were Gladwin residents or if they weren't when they came here, let's hear those stories. But then you have from colonial times up to current times in the Oddfellows Cemetery and in the old Methodist Cemetery, a story, a tapestry of time, and an opportunity because the community is going to take over the responsibility for that site. But across the country, there are thousands of cemeteries that have not received that attention. So we can set a template and an example, and we can share it with other communities. So we'll see what happens. But Saving Hollow Ground now has done close to 100 veterans graves plus citizens' graves in that cemetery. We're posting cues out to people and say, Robert Smith, Civil War veteran, who was he?
Are you the folks that community calls after a report of vandalism in a cemetery to go in and upright the gravestones and so on?
Occasionally, we've been called in to do that type of work. What I've been trying to reach out to correctional facility, including Radnor and other groups, is how can we tie in public restitution instead of going down the road and picking up trash? Let's get those individuals in the cemetery. They will walk away from the experience, I guarantee, a more grounded person, and the public will see the positive results of it too.
It's a good idea. They're all great ideas. All it takes is time and a little money.
We need help. We need
You
help
have a
and
board?
ideas. We have a board, and we're hoping to expand it because we need more people to step forward with a broad-based mission.
And you're housed now at Uncommon Individual Foundation in Devon?
We have an office at our post, the American Legion post I'm a member of, at Bateman Gallagher Post, 401 East Lancaster Avenue. But the main operation is moving now to the Uncommon Individual Foundation because of all the books and archival space that's there. Plus, there's an opportunity to interface with entrepreneurs and mentors in different areas.
Yeah, that's grand. It's a great story. I wish you well.
Thank you.
I will now pay special attention to every monument I see and wonder where it came from and whether or not there's someone like you, I hope, who is caring for it and assuring that it'll be there for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your work. If you're interested, you can learn more about Saving Hollow Ground and the work that Eugene is doing on the Facebook page. Is that right?
That's correct.
Saving Hollow Ground. Good deal. Until next time, this is 30 Minutes. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves.